Welcome to Mortgage Mom Wines, a weekly podcast with real and relatable talk and advice for real women. I'm your host, Megan. Grab your extra large coffee or glass of wine, no one is judging, and let's grow together. Okay, cheers and welcome everyone. We are here for an episode of Mortgage Mom Wines, and I have a very special guest today. I'm super excited to welcome Amber.
Guys.
There's Amber. So we're going to just get right into it. I'm going to do a brief introduction of her, and then I'm going to ask her to kind of introduce herself as well. But I have known Amber since I've lived back in Illinois, almost for, I'd say, about a year and a half now. And she is a fantastic local realtor, but she's also so much more than that. She is a young female real estate investor and just one of the most driven young women that I've ever met in my life. And I'm so happy to work with her. But Amber, I want you to give us kind of a brief background, just who you are, when you got started in real estate, and your age is super important too. That's something I want to highlight. So I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Amber. I am 25 years old. I live in Tinley Park. I've lived here my entire life. So from Tinley Park, Illinois, about 45 minutes south of Chicago, if the traffic's good. And I am married to my amazing husband, Eric. We work together on a real estate team called the Hollop Nowinski Group at Home Smart Realty. And we are also real estate investors too. So I'm really excited to be here today and share our journey with you. And hopefully listen to the podcast in the future and learn from you guys too.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And I kind of want to talk about what inspired you to get into real estate, and not just get into real estate, but get in at such a young age.
Yeah, I was 21 when I bought my first home. So basically like I was very I guess like business minded always, but I never really knew how I was going to use that business mind to do anything. I never had like a business idea or anything. I thought I had to have like a super cool business idea and have like a cool name for my business, but I never knew what I wanted to do. But basically at the age of 19, I started working full time. And then I didn't have a guy in my life really that was that serious at the time. So I was like, well, what's next for me? And homeownership seemed like the next thing. And moving out of my parents' home seemed like the next thing. So it probably around that 19 years of age, I really started to hustle and work really hard to save more and more money to be able to purchase my first home that I thought I was going to move into. But all my friends were still in college, and I didn't want to live on my own. I didn't really have any roommate opportunities. So I asked my parents if I could continue living at their home and purchase a home to be able to rent out
So
to
you
other
stayed at
people.
home.
Yes.
Parents didn't. So, and I have to ask, did your parents help you purchase your first home?
No, they did
Okay.
not. So they were not a co-signer on my loan. They did not provide any down payment assistance funds. I put down 20%.
Wow.
And
So,
I earned all of that money on my own. I had the credit score to do it, the income, etc.
so how did you earn that money? You said you worked full time. So
Yes, I was
you just saved
working.
all of that money while you lived at home?
Yes and no. Definitely some of my full-time job money was going toward my savings. However, in addition to my full-time job and in addition to going to school full-time online, I also had a business too. So I had a pet sitting business, and a babysitting business. So,
Love it.
I really wasn't even living at my parents' home that much
You
because
were
I was
working.
spending the night in other people's homes. Yes, I was an in-home pet sitter. I watched people's pets in their home while they were away on vacation. So
And I love the entrepreneur mindset that you had at such a young age. And it just goes to show that yes, a college degree is amazing, but at 19, here you are working and hustling and building that business, pet sitting and doing things that you're able to do in that moment to not raise money, but to earn money, right? To raise for your business essentially. So I think that's
yeah,
absolutely amazing. Um,
I
yeah.
I actually had a misconception. I was only making about, I would say like $35,000 a year at that time. I didn't even have my degree yet. I was working at a
Okay.
nonprofit. And I told myself that no lender would ever lend me a loan because I didn't make enough money. And that was so not true.
Right.
Now that I'm a realtor, I understand you can still maybe be considered low income, but you got to speak to a lender to know. Don't just
Yes.
tell yourself that you can't get pre-approved. You might be really preventing yourself from home ownership. Talk to a lender, talk to a realtor, understand what you need to do because I was actually saving up enough money to buy a home in cash
Oh,
because I
wow.
thought I would never be approved for a loan, but that was not true. So.
Awesome. Well, I love that you shared that because it's so true and it's such a good tip for those who think they need to save all that money or just, there might be that roadblock there. Never too early to talk to somebody or meet with them.
Right.
Do you have any like specific role models or anybody who influenced your decision? Or I know you have that entrepreneur mindset, right? But did anybody really influence you in a certain way, or can you think of anyone?
Yeah, I definitely grew up around real estate investing. No one in my family is a realtor specifically, but my dad and uncle are real estate investors. They own 12 properties together in Tinley Park. So I grew up around the real estate investing business. When I was like as young as 5, I was helping my parents clean out homes after tenants moved out. On the first of the month, people always deliver those checks to the door. So I
Yeah.
got to learn about, the income coming in. And my dad even taught me how to show the rental houses and how to screen tenants. So I
Wow. Oh, that's
definitely,
awesome. So you had
yeah,
that little bit of mentorship, right? See,
I
kids, listen to
did.
your parents. We're not all bad.
Yes. So that was definitely helpful, but I did have somebody else that really spoke into my life around the time that I really started taking the idea of real estate investing seriously. And his name is Dr. Richter. I
Okay.
was never blessed to have him as a teacher at my high school, but I connected with him. One of my teachers kind of knew that I might be interested in real estate investing one day. So they were like, "Hey, do you know this teacher?" I was like, "No, never had him before." And they were like, "Well, you guys should get to know each other." So in the hall one day in high school, I had struck up a conversation with him, and he's a real
Wow.
estate investor. But then
And a
we connect.
teacher. So a teacher and a
Yep.
real estate.
Yes.
See, anyone
Yep.
can be a real estate investor. I love that.
Yes. That's for sure.
Keep going.
So after high school and when I was in college, around that time of 21, when I bought my first home, I had reached out to him and just said, "Hey, could I treat you to a cup of coffee? And we can talk about real estate investing." Um, and he was like, "Well, I don't like coffee, so meet me at McDonald's. I'll get a Coke." But hey,
Don't like
whatever
coffee.
floats.
Your first objection.
Yeah, right. So we met at coffee. I'd actually brought along Eric then, who's now my husband. And we had sat down and he was so kind to be so vulnerable and share all of his numbers with us about real
Wow.
estate investing and how much his apartment buildings were making as a return on investment, ROI. He was discussing cash flow with us. And that was something I'd never been exposed to. My dad and uncle maybe my uncle is numbers minded, but my dad isn't. So they had never
Okay.
sat me down and explained all of that. And so for the first time, I had actually started to see how much money could be made through real estate investing and how wealth could be built through real estate investing. And I left that meeting going, I have to do this. So yeah, that's how I
Had
got
that fire
started.
in your belly. That's amazing. What an
Yeah,
amazing teacher to sit down and take the time. I think it's so important to point out that no matter what you're doing, whether it's real estate investing or any other business you're getting into, especially as a young woman, to have some kind of mentor or somebody to take the time to sit down with you. And on the flip side, as we get older, to kind of be that person for somebody else too, right? Um,
yeah.
so getting into it, I mean, that all sounds amazing, right? But I really want to get into the nitty gritty of like, what were some challenges that you faced? Like if you had to say what your biggest challenge was doing it, because this isn't all like, I always say this isn't all, cupcakes and rainbows. Like it's not all easy, right? So what was your
Yeah.
biggest challenge?
I would say in just getting started, my biggest challenge would probably be just like believing that I could do it. I was buying my very first property, and also I had never even bought a car at that point. I was
Wow.
driving
Oh
my
my gosh.
parents' extra car. So this is the biggest purchase of my life aside from the laptop that I owned, right?
Okay.
So like a $300 laptop versus a $130,000 house then.
Right.
So like just believing that I could do it, that I was capable of finding a renter, believing that there was demand in my market, like believing that I could take care of any maintenance issues. I just really had to like bet on myself, in the
I love
biggest
that.
financial way. but I did it. And of course, it's had some challenges. There's always the occasional maintenance challenge that comes up, or maybe a
Yeah.
tenant issue. But at the end of the day, all of the benefits of being a real estate investor and the wealth that we're building for our family definitely outweighs the challenges that come with it.
Yeah. And I want to point that out too. It's crazy that you say that because I find myself in the same position of not believing in myself, or I call it imposter syndrome, or you just feel like I'm not worthy of this. And as women all the time, I think we feel like we're not worthy or we're less than, or how can we do this? Like, I'm a young girl, like I don't know how to do maintenance and all those kind of things. I mean, that's really intimidating, right? But I love that you took a risk, and no investment comes without risk. Whether you're putting money in the stock market, you're putting money, I mean, wherever it is you're putting it, there's risk involved. Like the bigger the risk, the bigger reward. But I love that you took like an educated risk, I'll call it, right? And I love that you believed in yourself. And I think that's so important as women, that we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe we can do it, because we can. Like we can do anything, right? I think it's just amazing that you, even though you were probably a little bit scared and intimidated, you did it anyways. And I think that's
Yes.
fantastic.
So glad I
I
did it.
just love
I'm
it.
so glad. It's a huge part of my life and a huge
Yeah.
passion of mine. And I love teaching other people about real estate investing. And I mean, it's the best way to build wealth, in my opinion. There's so many different ways to gain wealth through appreciation, through cash flow, through debt pay down. Like, and then there's just tax benefits to it as well. It's
Yeah.
just, I love
Could go
it.
on forever. That's gonna we'll do a whole nother
Yes.
episode, right? On the on the numbers of it. We'll kind
Yes.
of geek out over that.
Right.
But I mean, there had to be a learning curve, right? So I know you just said you're really big on educating other people. So aside from talking to, obviously that teacher was a huge help, right? How did you educate yourself about real estate investment? And were there any specific like resources or tools or anything that you found helpful? Like if I'm a young woman listening to this today, or even you don't even have to be a young woman, if you're 50 years old and listening to this today, like what are some tools or
Yeah.
some things to get started?
Absolutely. So this is going to sound so cliche because if you've ever listened to any real estate investor on any podcast speak, they're always going to have this answer. But
Must be
the
important
book,
then.
yeah, exactly. If you hear things multiple times, it might be that I'm a believer, so God is speaking to you, or
Yeah,
it might just, yeah, you should definitely, listen
listen.
up. But Rich Dad Poor Dad is a very popular book in the real estate investing world, and I am not a book reader by any means at all.
Okay.
But my husband, then boyfriend, got me to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like I'm pretty sure it was 3 weeks into dating, so
Oh my
I really
gosh,
liked
go
him a
Eric.
lot. Yes, I was very interested, so I read the book, and it helped me understand, some of the benefits of real estate investing. So
Okay.
definitely, there are great books out there like Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. But in addition, the community called Bigger Pockets is
Okay.
really great. Bigger Pockets, it's a online website forum where you can ask a bunch of
I'm
questions,
writing this
see questions
down.
and
Bigger
answers.
pockets.
Yes, Bigger
Okay.
Pockets. And Bigger Pockets also has multiple podcasts. So they have a Real Estate for Rookies podcast. The first year that I owned my first home, I cut the grass over there instead of paying a landscaper.
I
So
love it. That's
when I
that
was laying,
hustle.
yes, when I was cutting the grass, when I was, working on the porch railings and painting them, when I was pulling weeds, etc., I was listening to the Real Estate Rookie podcast on like repeat. Also, just as a realtor, I do a lot of driving, so I'll listen then. There is another more advanced podcast that Bigger Pockets puts out too. There's tons of YouTube videos. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but there is a YouTuber that specializes in midterm rentals, which is something
Okay.
that we specialize in. So I love listening to him talk about, his tips and tricks. And yeah, I just love to constantly consume and listen to things in the background as I'm going to and fro.
Okay. So a common theme I'm hearing is everything you said, at no point did I see a bunch of dollar signs.
No, in fact, you can listen to Rich Dad Poor Dad for free on YouTube. The recording is on there.
That's amazing. I was just gonna say,
It's
aside from maybe
everything I
10 to
mentioned is
$20
free.
for a book, right? But you don't
Yeah,
even have to spend that. You can listen to that book for
right.
free. And
Or check it out at your library.
that's a library is a great point, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I need a lot of money to start a business, or and yes, you needed the down payment for the house, right? We already went over how to make that. But as far as the learning and the educational piece of it, I think something we're battling now, as you know, with our generation and several generations is student loan debt. And so all this education that you've given yourself didn't cost you a single penny other than some of your time and your willingness to learn, right? Being open to that. So I love that you shared that through books and YouTube and resources that are at our fingertips that don't cost a thing, we can teach ourselves how to build generational wealth. And that's something, if you take one thing away from this podcast today, I hope that that's it, that you don't need a bunch of money to get an education.
I'm a cheapskate, so
Yeah,
I love free things.
there's so many resources out there that don't cost money. Now, I'm not saying paying for an education is a bad thing, and I'm not saying paying a business coach. I mean, I have a business coach and mentors and things like that that do cost me money, but there's other things that don't. And I think the power of your personal drive and willingness to learn is a huge thing to point out too.
Absolutely. Don't
Yes.
spend a down payment on a huge coaching program. I would say there are a lot of like real estate investor coaches out there that want to charge you five, 10, $20,000 for their
Yeah.
program. Like, I mean, my personal opinion is save that money for your down payment. You're gonna need it. So
Love that advice for sure. And I think there's the power of sitting with people, especially other women and people in your circle, that rather than sit down at a coffee shop and gossip, let's surround ourselves with people and sit down at a coffee shop with people who chat goals and people who chat real. If you're into real estate investing or whatever it is you're into, find those circle of people that build you up. I mean, Amber and I sat down at a coffee shop last week, and I can tell you, like, our conversation, I left so motivated, so empowered. We don't sit there and talk about other people. We talk about growing, and we talk about how to grow our businesses. And it's just the conversation looks different. And it's nice. You got to surround yourself with people that are going to help you reach your goal. I think that's something just really important to point out too. And I want to, if you had advice, Amber, to a young female investor, any investor, it doesn't necessarily have to be female, but what would you say is your best beginner friendly strategy other than reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, or any, like, if you could give one piece of advice, right? What would you say?
All right. This piece of advice would be for someone that wants to get into real estate investing and they already own a home.
Okay.
This would be this particular piece of advice. You don't have to have 20% to down to
Reach.
buy a home. So you can, if you are a homeowner today, you could potentially turn the home that you're sitting in right now into a rental property. Um, that's what I'm doing right now. So there's a lack of trim on my door right here. I'm living in a fixer upper that
If
will
you
one
could see
day.
the video, you guys on YouTube, Amber's got missing trim
Yeah.
from her door, if you're just listening.
Yes. Yes. There is missing trim behind me. So you could potentially turn the home that you're living in today into a rental property and then go out and purchase another home. And in your new home that you'll move into, you don't even have to put 20% down. You could put down potentially as little as 5% or 3.5%. So don't think that you have to have a ton of money in order to get into real estate investing. And if you don't own a home and you want to be a real estate investor, start with the home that you live in. Buy a home, live in it, and then maybe after a year, go out and buy another one and upsize. So
That's a great point. If you don't own a home, you only have to live in it for 12 months before you can turn it into a rental. So something I want to point out is with beginning to invest, we have to have a little bit of patience, right? Of course, we're in a hurry. We want to do it as quickly as we can. You think a year is a long time, but in hindsight, I feel like the days feel long, but the years are short. And as the older I get, that's how I think about it. So if you only have to live in this house for a year, and maybe we have a little side hustle where we're saving that 5% down payment for the second house and you move into it, I think a lot of people also think you have to buy your dream home. Like, my first house has to be my forever, my dream home. I mean, Amber, how many houses do you own right now?
I own 6 homes right now.
6 homes. So how many have you lived in?
2.
Okay. So, and the home you live in now, is that your forever home?
No. So the home I live in now is the same exact home I lived in before, except it has an addition of one bedroom off the back. Like, literally nothing changed except one bedroom. So like the idea is every time we move, we upsize a little bit more and get closer to our dream home and we turn our previous home into a rental.
Yeah. I love it. See, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. What would you say are your future goals for investing? I think especially now we're in January, right? Like it's the beginning of the year, everybody's setting goals. What are some of your goals
I
for?
love January. I love goal
I
setting.
know, right?
It's my
I love
favorite
it
time
too.
of year.
I geek out,
People
but
say they like hate New Year's, like New Year's Eve and all that. I'm like, I love it because it's goal setting. But
yeah.
um, our goals for 2024 in particular are to buy three buy and hold investment properties. So those would be properties that will rent out ongoingly on a lease, and then to buy one flip. That's
Okay.
my husband's project is the flip.
Okay. So it'll be your first
um,
flip then?
Yes, our
Okay.
first flip. We've never done a flip before, but he's very interested. He sees, as realtors, we see properties get sold that look like trash, and then a couple months later, they get sold and they look like a really shiny diamond. So
Mhm.
he wants to enter that world. So that'll be our goals for next year. Um, yeah, it's a big year. Our so far, um, with the six investment properties that we have, we've been able to cover all of our expenses by the cash flow that we generate from our properties.
Say
That
that
being
again.
said, yes,
Say that
I'll
louder
break
for
it
the
down a
people in the cheap seats.
little. So, all of our cash flow from all of our properties, the leftover money every month from our properties after paying off our mortgage and our taxes, our homeowners insurance, maintenance, and vacancy, the money that's left over, that covers all of the expenses that Eric and I have. Now, granted, we don't have a family yet, and we don't have to pay for our own health insurance yet because we're only 25 years old. But in
All the more
2024, we're
reason
gonna
to get started, young people.
Yep, yeah, exactly. So if you are young and listening to this, now is your time. Let's go.
Yes.
Like minimize that debt, maximize that income, and invest right
Yeah.
now. This is the time to do it. Because I hear kids are really expensive. So
Kids are,
um
I can attest to that. I have
yes.
two kids and they are very expensive. However, I will also say they're great motivation for
Mm,
building generational wealth
yeah.
because we want those kids to be able to pass it to their kids, and kids are the best motivation at the same time. But yes, you are correct. They are very expensive.
Yes. So our goal in 2024 is to continue to increase our income through those three additional investment properties that we plan to purchase. Because those three additional investment properties, the cash flow from that will cover our increased expense of our healthcare insurance in 2024 that we'll have to purchase mid-year when we turn 26. Right now we're on
Okay.
our parents' health. So
So
yeah,
you're
isn't that
planning for
exciting?
future expenses. I want to point that out too. As a
Yes.
planner and an A type and organization kind of makes me tick. I want to point that out that you're constantly planning for future expenses. And that's something super important when you're thinking of investing, and not just real estate, but in anything, is the planning. So we talked
Yes.
about January and setting goals and making planning. Now is the time. I always say it's just a hope until you write it down, or a
Mhm.
dream. Once you write it down, then we start our plan, right? And then once you have a plan, you put it into action. So it sounds silly, but like Amber mentioned before, just to kind of summarize, rich dad, poor dad, bigger pockets. She said it's cliche. This is what all the investors say, but that's because it works. Like the people who tell you to write down your goals every day, write down what you're grateful for. I'm a huge fan of the Miracle Morning. I'm kind of going off track, but this isn't scripted, so that's what we do here. But it's so true. And it's, if you hear it more than once, I was listening to, when I was in a conference one time, I can't even remember who was speaking because there were so many speakers, but one thing that really stood out to me was this: if I say it more than once, you should be writing it down. It's important. And I'm gonna kind of tap it there because I think that's so powerful and a great way to end it. And like Amber said, it's cliche, but like they're all saying it for a reason because it works
Yep.
and it's true and it's proven and it's worked for them. So anyways, I'm just, like I said, I'm gonna leave it there because I think that's a good mic drop
Yeah.
to end it there. But thank you so much, Amber, for helping encourage us and share your story with us. I think it's incredibly inspiring. And you should be extremely proud of yourself for what you've done. And I just thank you for your time today. And I hope to have you on again. We can dive deeper into a lot of these topics. I would love to dive deeper in a future episode about the numbers and the maintenance and really how, on a higher level, reviewing all of this type of stuff for investment properties.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Megan.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right, everybody. Well, cheers. And I have my Stanley today, not my wine. So this is Mortgage Mom Stanley's, but that's what we're doing. All right. Thank you for listening. Follow this podcast for more real life and real talk with the occasional whining thrown in there. Red or white, the choice is yours. See you next episode. Cheers.